Okay, so we're just going to pick up on what we had left off before in terms of, the conflict sort of resolution part, and you raised a really, really good point.
Okay, so relationships are, I mean, if you just search on Google, honestly, or whatever, like any or YouTube, discussion on relationships is endless. It clearly is the biggest pain point for so many of us.
Mm.
Um, and statistics on divorce are quite high. And when the kids are involved, it's just really even more painful just to see custody battles and how much children are involved and when things escalate. So, ultimate prevention for all of this
I know
is
you've said this for a long time.
truth, right? Now, how much is this a luck, Brian? Or can't be a luck. We probably have some indications of, who is going to be easier to live with or find those or build the foundations for the healthy relation, which we keep repeating over and over. Support is rest is rest. So definitely rest, but support the respect and trust and care and willingness to really look at the other person's happiness as something that we emphasize as well. And so these things are obviously easier with some people.
Sure, I think that that's a fair
And
statement.
so, yeah.
You know
How do we
why?
search and
Right.
how we know who is a keeper?
I think you know already why I think so many relationships don't work, and that is because of how we go into relationships. So I think that the reason so many relationships fall down the way they do is because the natural tendency we have, I mean, this is on the back of us discussing conflict. This is not on the back of us discussing relationships. But, well, conflict is really what undoes relationships to a large degree.
And just to add something, and so I'll let you go on. The everything we discussed requires a lot of self-regulation, high motivation, high effort. And if that's really required, we know probability of success is lower simply because
Yes.
the effort is very high.
Yes.
So how would we reduce the effort? Well, choose the person that you
In
require
essence,
less work,
right.
honestly,
So
on all of this.
the way in which we could say, when we talk about safe relationships, when it comes to the E, the first thing is, are they easy? And easy
Yeah.
relationships are relationships where we are agreeable. Not only
Yes.
that is where we find ease is we agree on so many things that we can smile and laugh and enjoy, or be unhappy about together. It's we share the same kind of emotions and experiences around the things we agree on. And that just makes for a, more comfortable fit. So the relationship is easy. The way I would describe it oftentimes when I would be sitting with somebody who was looking to get into a relationship or marriage, the first question I ask is, how easy is it? First question I ask. And if they are telling me, right, again, that it's difficult, I've got to avoid this and I got to be careful how I say that. And if I do, I'm immediately, well, this is when the analogy, and I've probably used it before, we're out at sea and, the water's level and we're drowning. Well, when the waves come,
Yeah, what?
then you're in big trouble. So one of the things or the reasons, if we're talking about, sort of the ultimate conflict prevention in relationship, and ultimate is a big word, but just giving the indication of to your point, being with the right person, which involves being the right person. I think both are involved, which highlights that there is a mutual or
Exactly.
bidirectional commitment and effort and a willingness to sacrifice. In other words, give of self and things for the good of the other person. That's the mutual commitment right there. So if we look at that and say, how do we reduce the tendency towards the disagreements and the inevitable arguments that we typically use or default to resolve disagreement? How do we try and reduce that? Well, the first thing is we probably need to have an idea of what conflict or disagreements we have with the person when we meet them or in the earliest time. Now, why is that difficult? Because we don't want the relationship to be difficult. So we are incredibly agreeable. We're incredibly given to being on our best behavior, saying the right thing, giving the right gift, sending the
So we
good
go on
message.
dates. We're not.
Again,
We're not sharing toys yet.
right. So the idea is we go into these relationships with this commitment to being, I don't want to say the perfect version of self, commitment oftentimes to being somebody else, not even self, because we know self might not be enough to really catch this, amazing person on the other side. So what we do is we try and avoid conflict, right? And I'm not against avoiding conflict. There's a time when conflict avoidance is appropriate. But if we're avoiding conflict over things that we strongly
Well, we're
hold
trying
to,
to impress.
we're trying to impress, we're
Exactly.
doing that. What we find is we are setting one another up in many respects because we're not being honest. So when we settle into a relationship, and now I'm a little bit more comfortable seeing as though I've got you to be able to share my opinion a bit more freely. The other person comes as didn't know that, or I
Exactly.
thought the other. Now we sit again with unmet expectation, which we know, negative feeling and question marks, emotion, and so we go. So I think one of the most important parts is when we meet one another, there can be one of those types of early discussions that relate to, let's be willing to say, be your authentic self, share the things that you like and don't like, again, so that the other person knows what they're
Exactly.
getting into. And if we have a disagreement, let's, in many respects, see how we naturally tend to approach things, because that's going to give us good insight into whether or not we can resolve conflict. Because at the end of the day, if you go into a relationship that is seemingly picture perfect and you arrive at a disagreement, small or big, that you cannot resolve, that is going to result again in an explosion or an avoidance, meaning again, it's going to get hot in terms of the relationship and conflict. It's going to get cold as we separate. That's the danger time, because when we're in the cold withdrawal
Mm,
state is when we are trying to make sense of what just
exactly.
happened. And again, we are usually going to make sense of it in a way that may not be an accurate reflection. And this is going to establish for us the tools that we really need, maybe unhelpfully, in how we're going to deal with the next situation. Well, I'm not going to open my mouth there. And you might go months or years of not saying something until the point where now there are kids involved and I haven't slept
Yeah.
all night and the financial pressures are high and I'm sick and tired now of hearing you say it. But you've never said that before. Well, I'm saying it now, and you're looking at those kinds of things and saying, so what's the prevention? Be real, be honest, be willing to have the relationship fall down early because it's difficult.
And we discussed this. So we know, and this is actually not helpful at all. So when we find someone, the first thing we do, we isolate ourselves. We go, only two of us to the on different different places we
Yeah, we don't
love.
want
It's
to.
no one else is invading our space.
No.
It's just we just love being with each other. We talk only about this person. We just and then we realize the best thing to do, and you organically see person as they are, is if you see them in their own environment. So, or
Brilliant.
bring them to your natural environment, to your friends. Invite your friends to look at them without this pink glasses you have, because you think they're wonderful, and other people just have they will see them with a way better
So
viewpoint.
that's a great strategy of arriving at the very thing that we're saying we're hopefully committed to early, and that is being real,
Yes.
being authentic, being willing to say, I like this, or I believe this, right? Without the fear that the other person is not going to like that or is going to believe something else. Because those are the things, again, you want to know so that you can make an informed decision. Because again, a commitment is what's required for a relationship to really, really work. Because the commitment is the point of agreement when we're disagreeing on other things and when things are difficult. So we've said before, the way you resolve a disagreement is through agreement, but agreement on things that are more important. Well, what's more important than, again, commitment? When things get tough, I'm not going to run. When things get
Yeah.
tough, I'm not going to treat you disrespectfully, or I'm not going to do these things. I'm going to get it wrong at times. And we know that, which is where that margin and that, sort of goodwill comes in. But ultimately, when we're sort of back on track, we're committed to the same thing and working. You want to know that as early as possible, in my opinion, if your intention is to have a good and long lasting relationship. So that idea of seeing people in their natural
Habitat.
environment, habitat, is super helpful, because usually the people are going to be able, around them are going to pick up very quickly on, well, that's not, and they will oftentimes tease, or they will oftentimes joke around how on their best behavior this person is, since so and so is
Well,
in
I
the
think
room.
it's interesting to bring them to different environments and just to see how they deal with other people when they're not happy. I mean, at the moment, they will not
Brilliant
bring that to
statement.
you. I think how they, when their expectations are not fulfilled with other people, do they use the power if they have? Are they combative? Do they insult? Do they blame? Do they even, they don't assess at all what's happening? Even just in a car. I mean, when I see level of rage in some person, it's like,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
So to bring it
it
round
makes you
again,
think.
well, it should.
It makes you think. So there are these really red flags that you can start observing by literally observing how they
Yes,
talk to their parents, how they
yes.
talk to their siblings. Do they have this black and white really positioning? It's like it's all them, it's always them. So and I think the language they use and ability to insult others, while they may not show it with you, but once they become comfortable, question is, will they not be? So there are certain things. But coming to that, so that's one thing. But I also want you to pick up also what if the people come to you as a preventative to literally, I want this to work.
Yes.
What should we work on? So as we discussed this, no one comes skilled for relationship. We feel,
You think we are. We
yeah,
think
yeah.
we're
So
equipped.
because I can think, I must be thinking well. Because I this is really because I can get attracted to someone. I must be knowing how to love, and I think love is not enough. We really make this mistake. Love is not enough for relationship to really turn into something healthy.
Define what you mean by love.
Well, feeling, just the self. So
Okay.
just the feeling. So I
Then I
love
would
this
agree.
person. I think there's way more than that. I think there's the intention and decision and commitment and just respect in itself and how I carry myself and accountability and self-reflection and all of these things come into play if you want longevity. And so
Absolutely.
putting more on self. So rather than this mystical love will
Which
over
is
time hold everything no matter what.
which is exactly why when we started out the conversation, I said, in many respects, one's finding the right partner, one is being the right partner. So if a
Yes.
person comes to me and they're saying, I want to go into a relationship, and I say, well, is there anybody on the horizon? They say no. I say to them, don't get caught up in the list of what the other person should
Yes.
be. Get focused on what you need to be in order to make sure that you are the kind of partner that somebody would want to stay with and can contribute meaningfully to a long term relationship. So be the person before you start trying to establish who the right person is. Now, if you've got two people who have been doing that, very, very quickly
Magic.
they can establish, absolutely. They can establish respectfully, this is not a good fit. Or it was just like, so easy from the get go because there is clarity. So I think that of the most important things to understand, again, and as part of what we do with Perspective for Life in the Mind Map, is know who you are. Yeah, I'm amazed as to how little people truly know themselves. We think we understand ourselves well. We think we know what we're really like. And on the mind map, it says under the self concept area, the first thing, significantly inaccurate. It's what it says, right? Because we are so biased in many respects towards self and towards our intentions and our feelings and all of these kinds of things. And that's natural, which is why we need to be on guard against that, which is why under that section it also says have a legitimate distrust of self. And legitimate basically being the recognition that if I see myself as objectively as possible, which is difficult, I'm probably not as I think. Now, again, you might have people whose view of themselves is overinflated. And at the same time, now I think there are a lot of people whose view of themselves is very low. The point is, we're trying to establish who am I truly so that the things that I'm not great at, I can work on. And the things that I am good at, I can be thankful for and use to the benefit of the people who I'm with. So when you look at those kinds of things, ultimate prevention, get to know yourself and get to work on the things that need work. And sort of polish those things that are good and use them meaningfully well for yourself and for the people who are going to benefit from you in terms of the relationship. Remember, relationship is better together for a reason. Somebody has value to add to my life, and I have value to add to their life.
Exactly.
And that sense of I am valuable to them is tremendously rewarding. And the sense that I receive value from them is tremendously rewarding, which is why when we handle these things well with minimal conflict or conflict that is resolved, hopefully quickly, or if not quickly, ultimately, whichever one it is, that is when we are most likely to find we are not going to be part of the statistic, which is a divorce or relationship, which is an unpleasant place to be. So,
So now let's talk about the environment that we are right now in social media and all that. I find that as far as I'm looking, drama over, high emotions. Obviously, our brain is clued on for loss and negative emotions far more and pays attention, which obviously in attention economy, which is so much more on social media plays. Drama is so rewarded. People who really escalate quickly into absolute madness is would have really watched. While this calmness and rational, and that's not even because it's not entertainment. So now we are really watching us as our kids are watching this as something that has some social currency and rewarded, and I think that the reference points are skewed really. What kind of behavior we are now practicing attention seeking. We are
mhm.
now practicing drama. We are now practicing really exaggerated emotions because that's so rewarded. That's watched. That's attention that we get now. And I think we are finding interesting. There was a statistics on men and women and what before was stereotype for women. It's now very much 50-50. Like the men are also exaggerating their emotions and to find themselves more in attention space on the social media. So it's not in
Yeah,
itself.
I
I think
wasn't actually aware of that.
we are practicing and we're giving a cues to a generation that just not to have these skills of calm, collected, reasonable, coming back to resolution, not be self-centered, pay attention to the other person, care. I think we don't have enough of these signals. There's way more noise that I personally can,
I would agree with you. I don't think that there is enough in that is given to showing that the things that are actually valuable are the things that you've just listed right now in terms of being that person, being with that kind of person, so that collectively you can have again the relationship that is ideally good for both, as opposed to the drama and the fanfare and everything else. But as you were speaking about that, I was thinking, what is so much on social media about? It's about image. And
yeah.
that's the very thing that we started out by saying, be authentic self. And the idea is if one is patterning one's self on something that is drama because you think somehow that's what's going to get you what you want or whatever else it is you think is going to be the reward, I think we need to check what are our points of reference. So establish the point of reference very clearly. Is this what I think I want to be? And is that going to be something that is going to deliver for myself and for whoever else I'm with the kind of genuine, meaningful satisfaction that in essence we're fundamentally driven to experience? So I'll keep coming back to it. Be willing to risk being yourself. And if you are so offensive in whatever form or so weak in particular area, get to work on fixing it, right? In other words, exercise and develop the self control to develop the skills that are required to carry yourself well and relate well and meaningfully to other people. Again, it's actually not that difficult.
Is it difficult when you're young?
I think because of the points of reference that you've already pointed to right now.
Generally, just lack of experience, wisdom. I'm guessing emotions are already
Well,
heightened.
again, it's not that complicated. It doesn't need to be that complicated when you're young. When you're young, can you learn to greet somebody and look them in the eye? Can you learn to
Well, I'm
treat
talking about
other people with
20s
respect?
and
Oh, yeah, I'm
30s.
talking
No,
eight,
no,
nine.
no, no, no. I'm
Good
talking about
point with
when we are
conversation.
choosing really a partner. A lot of us are very young when we are, you know, entering some of the long-term possibly
So what was the
relationships
question again? I was off on,
on the young kids.
yeah, on the
I
young
mean,
kids.
can we have this wisdom and introspection
I
at
think
this?
so. I really think so. And I
Where are
think,
we learning this?
well, hopefully at Perspective for Life is one place, but, and certainly
To
as we
plug
work
in?
on that, yeah, as certainly as we work on that. But I think it is possibly learn it from the people who might be around you who have good relationships. You might look to somebody when you're 20 or 21 and say, who do I know that, whether it's family or not, who has a good relationship? And if I don't know any, do I know somebody else who might know? Ask somebody, ask a friend.
Mm.
Do you have somebody who you look at and this person's been married 20 years plus and they still seem happy? Do you think you could arrange for us to go and meet with them and ask them some questions? What a
Wow.
wonderful way to do that. Do
Imagine
something.
that.
And why not? Why not? Right?
I think workshops are still an option. I think lots of, I mean, as a young couple, I would want to go and really sit in some of the conversations or introduce some of the topics. Even just the watching a YouTube together and saying, hearing the language and exposing ourselves to a different kind of framework to think about the concepts that you've been just until that point,
Yeah.
maybe really looking at superficially. I mean, what does it mean? And just ask, what does it mean to invest in each other? What does it mean? I mean, these are
What
many things to just explore together. I think even as young person, just to see what are there, just to see together, and that's again a
points of
green,
reference, again,
yeah,
in many respects. Well, as a part of Better Together, which is the comprehensive perspective for life, sort of look at relationships and how it is that we establish what we had said are safe and, what are required in terms of building blocks and the kind of investment and all of those elements. We look at that. There is a specific section that I have in place and will do hopefully at some point, which is how do I prepare for a safe relationship? And
yeah,
it'd be along those are actually the easiest workshops to do because people are eager to see how it's going to be. The
exactly,
difficult workshops to do are the ones where people have been married for a long period of time and who are
yes,
struggling. That's something that I've realized in having done, the Better Together workshop is that's probably best done where people have the privacy of, being able to, as somebody
because
said to
it's
me, switch off the
yeah,
camera, because in essence, we're failing. In essence, we're struggling. In essence, we're falling down. And I don't
it's
want
a high
to,
vulnerability
it's
position.
really tough. So I think that probably the best workshops for Better Together or relationships that relate to people who are struggling are probably online or, one just with a couple on their own.
Exactly.
But the kinds of things I think you're 100% correct that I think make for great workshops or interactions with people would be those where there is an enthusiasm and a hope and a recognition that there needs to be some sort of clarity on the kinds of things that make for a great relationship. And again, there is that section that I actually have already sort of semi-titled Authentic Self, how to prepare for a great relationship. And I think that that is what I would be encouraging. What you and I come back to over and over again is you can't control or do anything on the other person. You first focus on doing the things for and on yourself that allow you to be in a position that, again, lends itself to a better relationship or a better singleness for that matter, whatever it might
Yeah.
be. Yeah.
Okay. So how should we end this, Ryan?
How should we end this? Well, my encouragement would be again, and I think you mentioned earlier, especially in Dubai. I mean, I see so many young people, and it's always interesting. So many young, and when I'm talking young now, I'm not talking 8, 9, I'm not even talking 20, I'm talking 25 to 35. People who are saying there just seem to be no good men. And I'm looking at, guys saying there just seem to be no good women. And somehow I'm looking, well, there are a lot of men and there are a lot of women. And
Now
what's
looking.
the confusion here? Right. But I think a lot of the confusion is because of those points of reference you've already pointed to. When you look at how people are trying to present
Yes,
themselves
it's
as,
distorted, honestly.
it's horribly distorted because it's assuming that in many respects, the appearance and the behavior and the avoidance of anything that is potentially threatening or disagreeable
Looks
is
staged.
removed,
Doesn't it look staged sometimes? I
which
mean,
tells you what people believe
like there
that's
is a
how it
camera
works.
following a lot of this. I mean, it's I don't know. And you're right, women. and this is something that is close to my heart. Self-objectification and objectification of women, we have seen explode. I mean, it's just exploded since the social media and the visuals came
Yeah.
back. And to value yourself and to reduce the value on the physical appearance is really, then what are you doing? I mean, you
So
pretty much
different.
feel there's a camera on you, that,
Yeah.
you feel judged by it. You're over invested, and research has shown and that's another way to self center. When you're self centered, it's very hard to be someone who cares toward others because you're so obsessed with self. Now, not that, and you're not aware of this because to reach certain standard that has been established is so high that you really not taking time, you're investing your
Yeah.
energy in this, you're very intentional there. So something has to give. And what gives is really paying attention to many other things that ultimately should produce a much happier life down the line. But it's just that what is right now rewarding is attention I get, and it's very rewarding. It's very attractive, and so and I get it's for women, we find this far more. I mean, it kidnaps them easier, obviously. And the society feeds this through media
So
and some of the value standards that we get. And funny they how quickly this happens. They did so they first asked the female participants in the research to watch through magazine. And these magazines are mostly really young women who almost at the level of perfection, is it by reality or not? But and so they asked them to look through these, and they asked one group to do certain intellectual tasks, and some of them to go for job interviews and all that. You have no idea how worse they present themselves when they have standards that they feel really bad about themselves, like I'm
yeah.
ugly,
Yeah.
no
Makes
one would
sense.
choose me. It's like almost horrible mirrors that are hanging around them,
Yeah.
and they just have this skewed what would value be. and
Yeah.
and I think there's something about that as well that prevents authentic self. But then we have this you enough movement in itself, and we don't know what this enough means. And then am I enough? Should I not work on myself? Should I not improve? Is there really a standards that I should be working toward and growing? Am I enough just because I exist? These are all confusing terms, and obviously, they're all floating as a rescue for the mood. So it's easier to actually fix the hair and face than
I
fix the
think
character.
that's exactly. I think that is such a good point. Is so many of the people in this day and age, we know that through what people have been exposed to as points of reference, they're using those points of reference to assess self
Exactly.
and to guide what one does with or for self.
And what's
So
rewarded? Yeah.
so you look at that and you recognize that oftentimes it's tremendous uncertainty, and I see this in men and women, but also mostly in women. There's tremendous insecurity internally. So the last thing you necessarily want to do is show yourself where you might embarrass yourself, or you might come across as not being sufficiently close to the standard that you're anticipating other people expect from you. So within all of that insecurity of what's going on inside, how do you do it? You mask it. And how do you mask it? You mask it by making sure that I present myself physically and possibly even behaviorally in a way that is just super catch. And at
Yes.
this particular point in time, the unfortunate part in the top right hand corner of the mind map is a thing called satisfaction adaptation. And what that means is simply this: the more I've experienced something in terms of satisfaction, the more used to it I become, the less satisfying and attractive it becomes to me. So that which is visually stimulating and
Yes.
satisfying, unfortunately, is likely to decline in the eye of the beholder
Yes.
because of the way in which the design is in the pursuit and preservation of maximal satisfaction. How do I keep going for more? I get used to what I've just experienced. In other words, what I anticipate is going to be great is great, but the push is to something more. Well, great has to be downgraded to good so that I can go for great again. And unfortunately, when you're setting, yourself up to be the one that everybody wants to be with to begin with, over time, it's not going to be as appealing to the person who's observing, right? And it's also going to, in time, expose what's beneath the surface. And if what's beneath the surface isn't of substance, that is tremendously, you know, problematic for the person in pursuit and the person wanting to be pursued, which is again the means by which we come together. So you're looking at that and you realize the system at the moment is horribly, horribly flawed in that it aims very much for the initial part, that honeymoon
Yes.
phase, whereas it's basically leaving a massive hole, a crevice in many respects, a crater underneath into which we fall because the authentic self doesn't really even exist because we don't know who we are. So, and we'll almost finish with this part. When I first wrote something bigger, which was a book, that was really on how to develop super self control, one of the things that I leaned on very strongly was people seemed to have a sense of who they were. There was a sense of a line that I wouldn't cross morally. There was a sense of this is who I am in terms of my character. And I was using those things as the hook for motivating what was required to bring about the goal. And it's still the system I use today. But what I'm finding is people don't know who they are. So I can't even hook necessarily an identity because the person doesn't actually have any real sense of who they are, who they want to be. They're lost. And I have people saying this to me, I just feel lost. I'm so uncertain. I'm insecure. Well, how do you want to anchor something to that? That's very difficult. So maybe, as we were looking at this as the ultimate prevention in many respects for, avoiding conflict in what will be close relationships, and is really one that encourages be willing to run the risk of find out who you genuinely are and establish who you want to be and get to work on those things, which ultimately, again, is going to require those few good decisions, which means probably better points of reference than the ones that we're ordinarily using, and then exercising the self control to work on those things, willing to run the risk of not necessarily being the first person somebody looks at or the first person who can catch the other one, but who's willing to say, I'm comfortable and confident enough within myself that I can be the kind of person that when somebody meets me and gets to know me for who I am, will want to stay. That's probably what I would be encouraging.
Yeah, meet them on your road because that's their road as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. Okay. Went a little different to what I thought, but it was such a good topic. So thank you.
Thank you.